Computer. Okay. Very good. So hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Planted Podcast. So this week I'm very excited to have on the podcast. It's been a little while since the last one, but we're bringing it back with a bang with Robbie Lockie, who I've been following for a long time now. But if you don't know, Robbie is co-founder of Plant-Based News and he's a digital creative and he's been vegan for 7.5 years. Is that right, Robbie?
That's right.
Very good. He grew up in Zimbabwe, and after starting in digital design in 1999, he's worked extensively with many different vegan projects and organizations, and he's played a real huge part in making veganism what it is today. Robbie also campaigns for LGBT rights. He's a Buddhist and uses his beliefs from this to inform how he lives his life, which hopefully we'll get into a little bit later. So Robbie, welcome along. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here. I'm good. It's quiet Sunday afternoon. Just got back from the food market in the park, which is lovely. Got myself some delicious vegan cheese, which I don't really usually eat a lot because it's not the most healthiest, but I couldn't help myself. It was a camembert and blue cheese, which is quite unusual for vegan cheese.
Wow.
Properly fermented, and yeah, just had a couple of snacks and ready to do the podcast.
Nice. Yeah, I've not tried the camembert variety or the blue cheese. I mean, every vegan cheese I've had has been pretty disappointing, to be honest. So I might have to give this one a go. Have you tried it yet, or is it yet to be tasted?
I had some just before. It was incredible. I don't know if you ever ate blue cheese or camembert, dairy cheese. It's very strong. It's got a really kind of powerful, pungent flavor, and a lot of kind of vegan cheeses try and kind of mimic the taste of that and don't quite succeed because they don't have the culture, the culture in it. It's actually a mold which gives the cheese its tangy, creamy taste. Sounds disgusting, but it's pretty delicious.
Now, do you find that you miss that though? Is that a craving that kind of occurs on a daily, weekly basis for you?
Not at all. I mean, my first year of veganism, I did miss it because obviously cheese is a very addictive substance, and so it's quite easy to sort of feel the kind of longing for that because obviously cheese contains casein, which is a kind of protein that becomes a morphine-like substance in your gut, casomorphine, and that's why people generally, many humans are completely addicted to cheese. When you consume it, your brain lights up like a Christmas tree. So that's why it's quite hard to cut it out. But after several months off it, you will lose that craving.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to talk, Robbie, about Plant-Based News to begin with. So if anyone doesn't know of Plant-Based News, I'm sure most people do, most listeners to this podcast, but it's all about spreading awareness, about ethical consumerism, sustainability, and a plant-based lifestyle. And I was just looking into, Robbie, how Plant-Based News came to be. It's quite an interesting story, right? It's in 2015, correct me if I'm wrong, but it started as a YouTube channel. And then you got approached by a prince. Would you like to tell a little bit more about that story?
Yeah, sure. It started in 2015. My good friend Klaus Mitchell saw there was an opportunity to talk more about the plant-based and vegan scene. There wasn't a lot, especially here in the UK. There was Veg News, which is an American magazine, which covered a lot of lifestyle, but not really anything that was British, that was of decent quality. There's kind of Vegan Society and a few other organizations that were quite sort of a little bit old-fashioned, not very youthful. Anyway, Klaus and I met at an event called Vegan Futures, and we got on like a house on fire and became really good friends and started working on plant-based news together. And not long after that, we got an email from a guy called Prince Khaled Al-Walid, who really sort of saw what we were doing and said, love what you're doing, and I want to support you and I want to help you develop it and grow it. And I want you to quit your jobs. So we both quit our jobs, not straight away, but it ended up us working full time and putting all our energy and focus into plant-based news. Khaled is an incredible man. He's involved in a lot of he is a vegan entrepreneur. He's involved in a lot of like plant-based businesses and vegan food tech and renewable energy projects. And yeah, he's been a great support over the few years that we've been running, really 3.5 years, which feels like a long time, but it's not really in business sense. It's just it's a very short time, but it's been an incredible ride. And sometimes I have to pinch myself as to how quickly things have grown and how mainstream veganism has got, thanks to all the food tech companies and all the availability of the products that are now on the shelves in the markets and the supermarkets today.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, if you could imagine 3 years ago, plant-based news growing to what it is now, could you ever foresee that this growth would have taken place? And where do you see it kind of moving to in the next 3 years, if you like?
I knew that it was going to be a big thing, but I didn't really know how big. I felt really passionate about what I was doing at the time. I'd watched Earthlings and had seen all these incredible films, and met so many people that were so passionate about it. People of all shapes and sizes. Strong people with tons of muscle and lots of people without muscle, and old people and young people and thin people and larger people. There was all kinds of different people of all different nationalities and races. And I was like, this is something that anyone and everyone can do. And the more I learned about how it can, a whole food plant-based diet can stop and reverse the leading killers of human beings, I realized that this is my mission, to get more people eating like this. The health services in all Western countries are heavily under strain because of chronic disease, preventable chronic disease, and a whole food plant-based diet is the solution to that. And I've never been more sure that this is the way human beings need to be eating. If we don't switch to a plant-based diet, not only are we going to have widespread environmental collapse, but we're going to have a tsunami of illness and chronic disease, which is going to potentially wipe out our species.
Yeah, so interesting, right? I mean, the turning point for me was reading How Not to Die by Dr. Greger. And it was not until that point, and I kind of feel a bit stupid saying this, but it's the truth. You don't think about it in this detail, but it wasn't until that point that, I realized many of the diseases that people die from, and many of the people who are in hospital right now are dying from illnesses that are preventable. And there's so much that we can do in our lifestyle. We might say that Uncle John or Uncle Patrick's died of heart disease, died of a stroke. And a lot of the time, it is preventable with a healthy lifestyle. And this is, why I'm so passionate about what I do, because there's so much to be said for the difference we can make by just adjusting a few healthy habits and lifestyles each day, and simply incorporating a little bit more whole food and vegetables into our diet, right? I was curious though, Robbie, because I heard you speak a little bit about how you found plant-based living on the health side of things, and you started with juice diets, right? How did that look?
Yeah, so before I was vegan, before I was plant-based, I was having a lot of health problems, skin issues, bloating, aches and pains. I just didn't feel great at all. And I saw lots of different doctors, and there was tests and specialists, and no one really could tell me what was wrong with me. So I decided to try and look at it myself. I was looking at things like adrenal fatigue, and the adrenal glands, and how diet and stress can have an effect on them, and how there's this condition which isn't widely and universally accepted, but adrenal fatigue is essentially where your adrenal glands aren't functioning correctly, and so your body is not producing all the adrenal hormones in enough quantity, so your body begins to sort of shut down, and it's a knock-on effect. It affects your sleep, it affects your concentration, it affects your digestion, and your whole body sort of begins to really break down in many ways. And so I kind of really started like trying to learn about the effects of diet on health and on the body. And I watched films like Forks Over Knives, Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead by Joe Cross, and Vegucated, and loads of other documentaries. And they really, well, Food Inc. actually as well, talking about how industrial food agriculture and how the effect it's having on our planet, but also about how, a lot of these fruits and vegetables that we consume are incredibly depleted in nutrients and minerals because of how the soils are being treated by industrial farming. And I thought, well, after watching Joe Cross's film Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead, he did 30 days of juicing. He was on a ton of medication. He was obese. He had lots of health problems, and he drank vegetable and fruit juices every day for like 30 days or 40 days, maybe longer. And within weeks of doing this, he was off his medication. He was off his blood pressure medication. And he started to feel incredible. And it made me think, do we really need to be eating meat? Do we really need to be eating animal products? Lots of other things happened at the time. I'd watched Earthlings, and that really taught me about the ethics of veganism, which for me solidified the belief and the idea of what we're doing and what we're eating. But the health side of things was just so clear. I saw huge results. I saw hugely positive results within weeks of of switching away from animal products. It took a while to get cheese out of my diet and milk, because as I said earlier, it's incredibly addictive, and I kept slipping back into it every few weeks. But after a 5 or 6 day juice fast, I had such great results. I felt amazing. And stupidly, at the end of that, I had a beef burger at a pub with some mates for a birthday party, and I only ate half the burger, and I felt so sick afterwards. And I realized, my love affair with meat was probably coming to an end. So yeah, I'm not 100, I'm not the healthiest person in the world. I've got a lot of still have a lot of chronic pain issues, and I still have chronic anxiety, but it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. And for the most part, I manage it through some light exercise and some pain medication, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was. And I do feel, a lot healthier. I would say, not doing too badly for I'm just about to turn 41. I feel like my kind of energy levels and my kind of outlook on life is a lot more vibrant, whereas before I used to struggle with low mood all the time. So that's really another thing as well, is the gut microbiome and the gut health. I saw huge improvements as well, so that's really a big part of it for me.
Brilliant. So you found obviously that the juice was quite a good way to start, quite a good Kickstarter. I've
Yeah.
had some clients feedback on past experiences with this kind of thing. I think it depends how you go about it, right? For some of my clients, they find it very difficult to adhere to such a strict, diet and to keep going, even if it's for a period of a week, which is not too long. But I know that for some people, that almost kickstart and that instant results can be quite helpful. Is it something that you'd recommend for others who are looking to kind of move towards this way of life, though?
I think it's all about your environment. If you are able to take a week off work and not be around other people eating, it's going to be a lot easier. Our entire culture is based around food and sitting down at a table and eating together. I would say that make sure that you're not just juicing fruits. You do need to juice vegetables as well, and have fruits and vegetables that contain fiber. It's a really important part of the human diet. Most people don't get anywhere near enough fiber in their diets, which is a vital part of good gut health and just general well-being, right? So don't think that having a juice diet is about going and buying clarified processed juice in the supermarket and drinking orange juice for 5 days. You need to have fresh fruits and vegetables, ideally organic if you can afford it, and have access to it. And if you want to jumpstart your health and you want to transform your health, juicing can be a great way to do that. Not all juice is the same. As I said, you get clarified, pasteurized juices that you buy in the supermarkets. Most people don't know that pasteurized juice is actually fruit or vegetable juice that's boiled to over 90 degrees for 3 seconds, maybe even more in some cases. That actually changes the molecular structure of the juice, and it probably damages many of the phytochemicals in the juice. So you want it fresh. And I think, if you're having 5 or 6 days of fresh fruit and vegetable juices, you're loading up your body with all those phytonutrients and fiber and vitamins. And also remember to drink it as soon as you've made it. Or if you're going to store it, make sure it's in an airtight container. Because obviously, as soon as you juice a fruit or vegetable, the oxygen in the air begins to oxidize the nutrients and the minerals in the liquid. So you want to try and drink it as quickly as possible.
Some great tips there, Robbie. Thank you. So obviously the health is one side of things, and it's really important to get in your veg, eat mostly whole foods. But I think all of that's redundant, right? If you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling down. So we have to obviously consider, this side of things. And I've heard you speak about your reason for going vegan and that very visceral experience that you had, when the cat passed away and it was in your arms, and how that related to Buddhism. I'm curious, did you find Buddhism at that point, or is it already something that was part of your life? I'd quite like to hear a bit more about your journey into that.
Yeah, so how long ago? 12, 13 years ago, I found myself sort of very isolated, living in London. My family live in Africa, so didn't really get to see them very often, and felt really lonely all the time and very kind of empty and just a little bit disconnected. I just walked around all the time with this sort of hollowness inside me. I
Yeah.
didn't really understand what was missing, like a piece of me was missing. That's what it felt like. And I discovered the Buddhism of Nichiren Daishonin. And Nichiren Daishonin was a 13th century Buddhist monk. and an activist. He was a political activist, and he stood up to the feudal Japanese government, feudal Japanese system, and challenged it. Because at a time where, you know, Shintoism and religions were enforced onto people. People had to practice Shintoism, and these kind of religions had all these rituals where you had to pay for this, you had to pay for that, and he studied all these doctrine, all the Buddhist doctrine, and said, you know, sort of challenged the system and said, you know, if we are practicing our religions correctly, why is there so much suffering? Why is there so much famine? Why are people dying in the streets? You know, we're clearly very disconnected people. And his story really inspired me. He was a man who was not afraid to stand up to the government, despite having, you know, them try and cut his head off several times and execute him. You know, it's so long ago. There's a lot of myth and mysticism surrounding him, but at the very core, there was a man who felt very passionate about what he believed in, which was the fact that every human being has unlimited amounts of courage, wisdom, and compassion within us, and that we're born with this stuff, that it isn't something that we acquire on a journey. It's something that we're born with, but we have to develop it. We have to foster it within ourselves and in the people around us. We have to encourage. So courage is contained in the word encouragement, right? We give courage to others through encouragement. And this is where community comes in. By being, you know, tribal creatures, we support each other and nourish each other. And the trouble with our modern world in this disconnected concrete jungle that we find ourselves in, we have become so disconnected from each other. And the irony is we've got these incredible pieces of technology that join us together, these networks, these internetworks that connect every inch of the planet, but we've never felt more disconnected. There's an incredible documentary at the moment on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. And if you're watching or listening, I really encourage you to watch it, because it talks about how the social networks have been weaponized and have been turned into these tools to kind of like enslave our minds and really kind of turn people into just capitalist machines, buying and buying and buying. The internet used to be this incredible place, and now it's just a giant shopping mall with advertising on every inch of it. And it's hard to exist within it without buying stuff. Anyway, going back to how I felt at the time, I felt very empty and lost, and I discovered this Buddhism. You know, I tried lots of different things. I was trying meditation, and I was trying all different sort of self-help stuff, and nothing really worked. And this Buddhism was really interesting to me because it was super simple in the way you practice. You sit down, you face a wall or some blank space in your home, you put your hands together and you chant a mantra, which is Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam means devotion. Myo means the wonderful law. And Renge means cause and effect. And Kyo means the sound or teaching. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Devotion to the wonderful law of cause and effect with the voice or with the sound or the teaching. And the principle and the primary principle of this is that every word, every action, and every thought in our lives creates karma, karma being the law of cause and effect. And that we live through our lives sometimes mindlessly, not realizing that all the things that we're doing are creating that future self, not just our future self, but the entire world around us, because we are all interconnected. And the more I began to chant, the more I began to realize my place in the world as a human being. Even though I felt isolated, I realized that I did have the power to choose. Now, obviously, I am within a society. I am afforded certain privileges of being, you know, a Caucasian male in this westernized society, which gives me certain levels of privilege where, you know, I'm afforded more privilege. Even though I grew up in Africa with not very much, I still came to the UK. I had the opportunity to do that and been coming into a society where, you know, I'm aware of my privilege. That being said, I've had to sort of work very hard to find my place, because previous to my spiritual awakening, you could say, I felt very lost. I didn't know who I was. What was the point of my life? Why am I here? I kind of felt like Earth was just this rock spilling pain and misery into the universe. and practiced really strongly for the last 10 years. Less so these days because of my life and my job's very busy, but it's always there if I need it. And it really helped me ground myself and feel a lot more confident in who I was as a person, and give me that strength. Give me that strength and resolution to sort of like have a mission and have a purpose. And once I found that purpose and that mission, which is not just plant-based news, but my mission to get people eating more plants and off animal products, gave my life just a different direction. And I don't really ever feel that lack of purpose or that lack of connection anymore, because I know that, you know, I'm here for a reason. At least that's what I believe.
That is really powerful. There's so much I could ask you about that, but I think this question of purpose is something that in the current climate, a lot of people are asking, including myself. You know, I've been through quite a challenging time myself recently. This was unexpected. And you do ask these big questions, don't you? When you're in times of uncertainty and your tribe almost disbands or whatever the circumstances might be, you start to ask, what is the purpose? What is the point of it all? And it's so interesting the way that you've, you know, kind of spoken about that in terms of you've got the power to choose, the power to be. So I guess my question really is, you know, when you're feeling anxious, or if you're getting up in the morning and you're feeling like you're struggling to motivate yourself or to do the things that you know you want to do, but you don't feel like doing it almost, or you might feel super nervous or super, worried about the day ahead. What do you do to give yourself the power to choose? Is it anything relating to Buddhism, or is there any set, routine that you go through?
Yeah, I would say that the power of meditation, mindfulness, and chanting are ancient, tried and tested ways to funnel and channel your mind in the right direction, no matter what our situation is, no matter what our circumstances, whether we are in an impoverished family, or whether we're working class, whether we're middle class, or whether we're like, upper classes with tons of money pouring out of our ears, but still desperately unhappy. That sense of self and that joy or that happiness, it can be elusive to people, no matter where they are in this sort of social standing in our human society. I think that it's so important for us to make space for ourselves every single day, even if it's just 5 minutes locked in the bathroom, if you've got kids or whatever, to sort of sit and just be with yourself and be with your thoughts, not your mobile phone. Don't allow yourself to be sucked into social media every time you feel anxious or stressed. It's about going inwards. It's about turning off the technology and sitting in silence, closing your eyes and taking breaths, and really not trying to strategize where you should be going, but just allowing yourself to be. Because in that moment, when you have that silence and that quiet, that is when the solutions come to you. No matter how bad your situation is, whether you've got tons of debt, whether you're in an abusive relationship, or whether you have illness around you which is causing suffering, we can get through difficult times, but we need to have courage, and we have to have the strength in us to move forward. And our world is gripped by a pandemic. There's a lot of misinformation and fake news pouring out of social media and the internet. People are confused, people are afraid. Now's the time for stillness and to really go inwards. We are facing an uncertain future, environmentally, socially, spiritually, economically. It's important for us to find a way through this. And I think if we don't have that quiet time to ourselves as people, even if it's just that 5-10 minutes a day, we can have those chaotic thoughts that really cloud our ability to figure out a way forward.
Yeah, that's lovely. So this kind of hollowness that you spoke about, was that something that gradually reduced and that you were able to, take away, or was it something that as soon as you kind of found your purpose, it just evaporated?
No, it's always there. I think that
Right.
annoying sense of disconnection, that abandonment is always there. We feel that, when we're children and we can't find our parents in the supermarket, or we feel that when we have relationships that end, or when friends treat us badly. That connection is what we crave as human beings. This is why we're addicted to the internet, because it gives us a false sense of connection. It also does connect us in many ways, but at the same time, it's not true connection, because it can be severed so quickly and so easily. People who we have disagreements with, who we thought were our closest friends or family, can block us and cut us out instantaneously. That's not really the way things have ever been, only until recently. And so, that feeling, that fear of disconnection is always there, and it has to be nurtured. This is why sort of friendships and community are so important in our lives. We should be calling our friends, checking in on them, calling our family, talking to them, not just relying on text messages and WhatsApps and emails. We should pick up the phone and call people, ideally video calls, where you can see the other person, see their eyes, see their body language. Some 80+%, I think, of our communication is done through body language. So if most of our communications now in the modern world is through non-verbal communication, through our thumbs, well, how much are we losing? So no, it doesn't go away. It just becomes a bit more manageable. It's always there at the door waiting to come in. And that is I guess, the human condition. We're always worried that we're going to lose the things we love the most. That is one of the Buddha's greatest teachings, is attachment, that through attachment comes suffering. When we attach to things, whether it's physical objects or other people or sex or drugs or whatever, when we over attach to something, it creates suffering because it's the fear of losing it. And this is where mindfulness and meditation and chanting can help a person, because you can learn to surrender and let go. It's a very difficult process. It's a lifelong process, a journey through detachment. We're born into this saha world, as the Buddha called it, the world of suffering. And we go through all these journeys and all these trials and tribulations and all these challenges. And it's our purpose to get through it, whether our life is 6 months, 6 minutes, 60 years, whatever. Like, the point is to experience, feel the pain, feel the suffering, feel the jealousy, feel the anger, feel the sorrow. And then when it's done, and then we return to whatever's beyond, if there is anything.
That's really amazing. So in terms of how you can translate this to your purpose of, helping people to move towards more of a plant-based lifestyle, is there any kind of, sort of specific ways that you can relate, the struggles that you've had in the past to helping people redirect maybe what they're thinking about, the way they consume animals? Because I often find it can be a very difficult sell, and I've heard you speak in many interviews about using the word plant-based, which I use a lot as well, instead of veganism, so we can kind of redirect it. But where's your starting point when you're trying to fulfill your purpose of helping people to move in this direction?
We have to be patient with people. For me, that's the number one thing. I feel like when you first become vegan, you're desperate to tell everyone about it. You want to shout it from the rooftops, because you suddenly realize that we don't need to cause suffering to thrive as human beings. Yes, there is always suffering in some way by our very nature. Us being here, there's suffering because of something. Maybe the cotton in my t-shirt was picked by people who are not paid properly and are exploited. The cocoa beans in my vegan chocolate may have been picked by children who are being exploited. There's ethical choices in everything that we do. And the point is that when we are communicating this lifestyle, we want to encourage people to take small and gentle steps, because ultimately we want them to stick with it. But if we go too hard and we push too hard too quickly, people shut down, they close up, they clam up, because they don't want to be told what to do. 99% of human beings do not like being told what to do. They do not want to be shamed. It might work for a small group of people, and it does sometimes. But I think the number one fundamental thing is just to be patient. I know we don't have a lot of time. I know we have an incoming environmental collapse, but what are we going to do? We can't hold a gun to people's heads. We have to be patient. We have to take the time to show people, and we can do that through food, cooking for them, showing them how delicious and tasty. Look at this vegan cheese that I had today. I mean, I know it's quite expensive. It's quite pricey, because obviously it's made in small batches, so it's quite hard to make it cheap. But we can show people that they don't need to buy animal products to enjoy those delicious flavors and taste, because it's all about taste. It's all it is. The only reason people eat steak is because they love the taste. The only reason people eat cheese is because they love the taste. It's not the fact that it comes from an animal that they love. They love it because of the taste. And if we can show them things that are delicious, healthier, better for the environment, I think most people naturally would be happy to switch. This is why I'm really passionate about cultured meat and eggs and cheese, these cultured products that will be grown by human beings, in kind of things that are a bit like breweries. We will be able to have all these things that people love. I personally won't eat them, because I don't think that they're healthy for our bodies. But if people want to eat them, they can eat them. We will be able to grow these things, and it's 1/100th of the environmental footprint. And there will be no suffering, and we'll have big machines that will make this stuff. And you go to a restaurant, and they'll have machines that will grow steaks and grow chicken breasts, and it'll be exactly the same. It won't taste any different, except there'll be no antibiotics, no viruses, no bacteria, no salmonella, none of that, no suffering. Just incredible human ingenuity and technology. Problem is getting people to that point where they're like, it's disgusting. It's like, what's more disgusting? An incredibly clean piece of meat made by creative and wonderfully talented human beings, or a piece of meat hacked off the body of a living, breathing, feeling, dreaming machine, animal, not machine. You know, what is more disgusting? What is more gross? The factory farms in which these animals live in are so horrific. If you look at the two things together, one sterile environment, clean and sanitized, like a lot like a brewery, making these cultured products, and on the other, this disgusting place where animals are pumped full of antibiotics just so that they can survive. This is our future. Like, we have this path in front of us, which way we want to go. So I'm really passionate about trying to show people this. Which path do you want? And I think most people will choose the path of the cultured products, but we've got to get them cheaper. We've got to make them more available, and we've got to show people just how easy they will be to enjoy in the future.
That's great. Yeah. And it just goes back to that thing of patience, right? And it's true of anything in life. The natural reflex of a vegan is to be angry, and it's almost satisfying to kind of release that, right? But
Yeah,
something about what you said earlier about sitting in that pain and just kind of, going through those emotions, having those emotions, and knowing then, kind of reevaluating at the end that in order to get to where I need to be, maybe I'm going to have to approach this a bit differently. I mean, some vegans would hear that and say, yes, but if you look back at, how the slave trade was stopped, and if you look back at, women's rights and all that kind of thing, they were very militant. But I think as humanity moves on, we learn and we discover, and we learn about human psychology. And that's why my mindset is completely the same as yours. We've got to be clever about this and know that just because we did this in the past to change this doesn't mean that we have to do this for the vegan movement, right?
I agree. I often hear very kind of like more, what's the word? Less temperate vegans say that it worked in this for other social justice movements. We need to do it for this one. What we are trying to change is something that is normal in human society. Eating animals, killing animals is normal. We are the ones who are abnormal. That doesn't mean good or bad. That's not positive or negative. We're less than 1% of the population. So we, by definition, we are not the norm, right? So we have to change the scales by integrating our idea into the mainstream. And we have to do that through you've seen the film Inception. We have to implant the idea into the social body so that the social body begins to change. We cannot do that by forcing it, because when the social body, which is our society, becomes aware of a threat, it tries to destroy it. It tries to stamp it out, and it does that in many different ways, through our legal system, through violence, through imprisonment. People who've tried to change the social body very quickly have been quickly stamped out or removed from the system. 99% of human beings eat animals. This is the way we've been for 200,000 years. We can't expect to change 200 to just thousands and thousands of years of culture and tradition in an instant. We have to work with people and help them see that we can live in a different way, because I just think that otherwise there's always going to be an us and then them. There's going to be two potentially species that diverge: human beings that are herbivores and human beings that are omnivorous, and some that are carnivores. Maybe we will begin to diverge as a species. Maybe our digestive systems will begin to change, and we will actually become different species through thousands of years of eating different things. I hope it doesn't come to that. I hope that we learn that we can live in harmony with nature, and that we don't need to kill and eat animals. Yeah, it's a tricky one, because there's just no simple answer, really. There is a sense of urgency, and a lot of people are very angry. They see all this suffering and they want it to change right now. But that's just not going to happen. We cannot force change of this sort because it's so widespread. Killing and eating animals is ubiquitous in human society. It's seen as normal as breathing air. And yes, that may be a problem from our perspective, but we're only able to work with what we've got, and we can't, as I said earlier, we can't hold a gun to people's heads and force them to change. We have got to provide solutions, and it's already happening. We're seeing widespread change and acceptance of this lifestyle because of the meat reducers and the flexitarians, people who are eating less meat. They're driving this change of plant-based products and driving the demand in supermarkets and in the commercial sectors, because the demand creates the supply, doesn't it? I'm hopeful, though. I think we're seeing such a huge change in the last half decade. I think in another 5 years, it's going to be, if we can get cultured meat onto the shelves, we'll see things change even more rapidly.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm always saying in the next 5 years, I do honestly think that most people will be plant-based, given how it's going. But only time will tell. Robbie, I'm conscious of your time. And just before you go, I'd just like to ask you a couple of questions. Well, normally, what I'm starting to do is ask people at the end of the podcast to briefly summarize what the purpose of life is. But I think we've already done that one. So my second question is really a book recommendation. It doesn't have to be plant-based specific, about anything that you would like to recommend to the listeners.
Good question. Oh gosh, I always ask my guests these questions at the end of my podcast, and I always find it always find it amusing how they squirm. They're like, "Oh, I'm reading lots of different books."
Such a pressure, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I mean, probably one of the books by Nichiren Daishonin, who is kind of my Buddhist mentor. And in the books are called the Gosho, and they're kind of like the religious books of of my faith, because they contain the letters of thousands of people who wrote to him through his days in isolation. And he was because the Japanese government was unable to successfully kill him, they banished him to a place called Sado Island, which is just off the north coast of, I think, the north coast of Japan.
Right.
And there he sat, and his followers would send him letters, and he would send letters back. And the Goshos, which are two sort of very large books, contain all these letters, and there are all kinds of letters of all different kinds of struggles. And I think, these kinds of things, and anyone I recommend who's interested in spirituality or interested in kind of self-development, look him up as a person, learn about him as a person. And there's loads of books written about him as well by a peace writer called Daisaku Ikeda. And Daisaku Ikeda is a sort of peace activist and journalist and writer and poet who wrote many books about Nichiren Daishonin's life and his letters as well, trying to sort of decode them and understand what he meant, because they're written from hundreds of years ago. And there's so much that could be learned from him, from his struggles, his mental struggles, but also the struggles of the people who wrote to him, and the challenges that they were having in 13th century Japan, from famine to death to family trouble to marriage issues. He just shared his wisdom and his encouragement, which was a big thing.
Amazing. Thank you, Robbie. And thank you for all you do each and every day. It's much appreciated. And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yes, for sure. Thank you for inviting me on. It's always a pleasure to talk plant-based and vegan stuff. It's what I live for.
Absolutely. Take care, Robbie.
Thanks, bro. Take care.